What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Terminator Training Show. I'm Kevin Smith here today with what's going to be part two of my Q&A from a recent Instagram Q&A. If you want your question answered in the future, give me a follow, Terminator_training, and look out for my Q&As in my stories where I answer some on there, and then I'll answer some more in depth on here. I try to pick the best questions or the most relevant questions to help as many people as possible. So I'm going to get to some more today, but a little quick life update. It's been a little while since I've done one. I am currently working with a coach myself. I already have a couple of business coaches that I've been working with for quite a while and getting really good results from that. I have been pretty outspoken in the past about when you want to get something faster, or if you want to do something and you want to make sure you're right, or in my case, if you want to take the guesswork out of things and not have to think about your own, even though I'm capable of setting up my own nutrition and my own programming, I still do that quite often for a lot of other people. It's like literally my job, and I've been doing it for myself for a really long time, and I'm just kind of over it. And so I decided that it was time to start working with a coach, with a fitness coach. And I am now working with Jay Ferruccia, who is one of the legends in the strength and conditioning sphere. He's been a coach for probably almost as long as I've been alive, and he crushes it. So we started working together about 10 days ago now. And basically, my main goals are very different from what they normally are. I've kind of brushed over this a little bit in passing in a few episodes / posts, but just a little recap on my last few months. I have had some gut issues, like serious gut issues and appetite issues. So I pretty much from early June to early September lost about 16, 17 pounds. And that wasn't all muscle. I was a little leaner, but I definitely lost some muscle. I definitely lost some water weight just because I really couldn't eat much. And I was also having some hormone issues, mostly related to stress. And not that I'm like crazy stressed right now, but like gut issues and stress issues, hormone issues are pretty closely intertwined. And I have kind of been burning the candle at both ends for a really, really long time since, basically I joined the Army. And then towards the end of my Army career, I launched this business. So I was working my full-time job as a Green Beret. And then I was also working what was almost a full-time job per week, almost 40 hours a week, give or take, depending on the week, on this business. And I didn't really take any days off, didn't really give myself a chance to enjoy myself and relax. So it kind of caught up to me, and I was just kind of in the struggle box. I was very, very inconsistent with my training all summer, which kind of is hard to be consistent when you have like no motivation, and you also have like no motivation for anything, not even work. Like my work output also went down. Luckily, it was right around the same time my wife came on the team, so she really picked up the slack, which I really appreciate, and she continues to crush. And now I'm back to feeling good and feeling like I actually want to work and train, which is nice. It's like literally the first time in my life I've felt anything like that. So that's good. And also now I have the template and it's created by someone else. So I don't really have to do a lot of thinking. I just go and execute the nutrition and the diet. And if you're watching on video, you might notice that I look a little bit leaner. Some might even say skinny. And I do kind of feel a little skinny, but I'm also like incredibly shredded right now. Probably currently 8 or 9% body fat and dropping because I'm in a calorie deficit, mainly to kind of get my gut health in order and establish my metabolism again. I've always had a pretty rapid metabolism, but my metabolic health has not been great recently, and I am trying to get that back in check. So I'm really cleaning up the diet, really, really cleaning it up. I have a very strict approved foods list, and I'm also in a calorie deficit, probably about a 500 calorie deficit. This is going to be a temporary thing. I'm definitely not a typical candidate to go into a cut unless I was like prepping for a bodybuilding show or something like that. But that's kind of the first step. We establish a good solid level of leanness, because when you're really lean, you go into a bulk, which I'm going to do next, and try to put on some of the muscle that I lost, if not hopefully all of it or most of it. When you're really lean going into that, you are more insulin sensitive. So it's basically just going to make it so that you gain more muscle and less fat on the cut. And you're really just going to soak up all the nutrients, the macronutrients, the micronutrients, the calories. And additionally, going into a bulk when you're really lean makes it so that you can get fat, you can gain fat over that bulk, which is just part of the process. It's an inherent part of the process, unless, of course, you're like brand new to training or whatever, which I'm obviously not, and still look lean. So, if I start the bulk at 6-7% body fat, I don't think I've ever been down below like 7.5-8% body fat before in my life. So that's going to be kind of cool. I'm already seeing like ab veins at nighttime after I eat carbs, which is cool. I've had ab veins before, but it's been a little while. So it'll kind of be cool. And then I will be going back into that bulk. It's not going to be like a crazy bulk where I just eat everything in sight. It's still going to be the same foods. There's going to be more of them, and probably some more refeed days with like really, really high carbs. Right now, I'm eating 25, almost 2,600 calories a day and 235 grams of protein, which is well over my body weight, mainly for satiety reasons. And I'm eating 300 carbs and I'm eating 50 grams of fat. And once in a while, every 6 to 8 days or so, we do a refeed day. That's still clean foods, but it's just much higher carbs, like double my carbs, sometimes even more. So I actually have one coming up and I'm looking forward to it. But that's kind of where I'm at right now as far as my goals. Again, my main goals aren't really to like perform and do a bunch of running. I'm doing very, very little running. I'm doing very little cardio right now. I do cardio 40 minutes a day every other day. And I lift basically on the days that I don't do cardio. But my cardio right now is very low intensity, like max heart rate of 130, because I'm just trying to keep my stress levels very low. So I'm eating very frequently. When you fast and you don't eat, you go long periods of time without food, kind of can spike your cortisol a little bit or raise your cortisol. Cortisol is not a bad thing, but if it's constantly high or if it's high at the wrong times, like later in the day, which has been the case for me for a little while, it's not great. But when you eat carbohydrates, it kind of, that insulin release can kind of keep your cortisol at bay, and it kind of keeps you a little bit less wired. And although I like feeling wired, it's just not great for your health to feel wired all the time long term. So we are doing some different stuff right now, and thus far I feel really, really good. I made a post yesterday about the fact that even though I'm in a 500 calorie deficit, yes, it's only been 10 days, but I go to bed very satiated and not hungry at all every single night. I haven't been hungry at all. I am eating, again, 235 grams of protein, which is about 50 more grams than my body weight. So it's more than necessary, but it is necessary right now for me. So that is kind of the current life update status, the fitness update status. And if you pay really, really close attention, I don't know if there's anyone who pays this close attention to my content, my stuff, you might have noticed a little bit of a drop off in output over the summer. And don't like to make excuses, but that is honestly the reason why. I just really had to grind and white knuckle a lot of things just to get myself to at least maintain some sort of consistency as far as business. And honestly, I basically fell off fitness wise. I was still training a little bit, but very, very inconsistently. And it was pretty demoralizing. But also during that time, turns out you can be not in great health and still improve your golf game. So I think I talked about it a little bit in the last episode. I draw my handicap like 14 this summer, and that is not very common. And also it's like a re-drop of your handicap. It's almost like muscle memory. If you train for a really long time, you got to where you're pretty advanced, you take time off, you regain that muscle a lot faster than it took the first time. Similar to golf. There's a ton of similarities to golf skill and fitness, in that I used to be in the single digits. I was a 4 handicap is the best I've ever been, 4.1 or 2. Back when I was in my mid-20s and playing golf a couple days a week. Usually I'd play golf like every weekend when I was in group. Sometimes we would play golf before or after work. There was a golf course right next to 10th group, and I was pretty good then, and I practiced a lot. But I have practiced a ton in the last few months, and I was playing a ton. I'm not playing as much right now just because I'm back on the work and fitness grind. And I actually enjoy that, but I'm still playing about 2 days a week, and I practiced 2 or 3 days a week. But turns out I am really grateful for the fact that you can progress on golf even though you're getting weaker and less healthy, and you just aren't feeling very good mentally or physically. And beyond that, I kind of found out that if I don't have something that I can make progress on, just in general, then I can go into some really dark places. So thankful for golf, and I'm going to keep sticking with it. It's not going to be as frequent because I have work to do and I've got clients to help out, but I do live in the home of American golf, Pinehurst, North Carolina. So definitely going to continue playing on a regular basis, and I love it. So one last notification before I get into some questions. The training team, T850, is on its very first week of the new block. If you're interested in checking that out, there's a free 1-week trial. So you can hop on, test it for a week. If you like it, you stick to it. If you don't like it, you don't get charged anything, you can hop off. And the main reason I'm mentioning that is because very soon the prices are going to go up. The monthly cost is going to go up. So if you join before the cost goes up, you're grandfathered in to the current cost, which I believe is $27 a month, which is less than $1 a day to get very, very high level training that works really well for a lot of people. It's kind of like a tactical hybrid style program that has ever changing blocks. Every 6 weeks, I do a new block. And again, the best time to join is either the last week of a block, which would have been last week, or the first week of a block, which is this week. So if you're listening to this right about now, you can still hop on. But even if you don't join until block or week 2 or week 3, it's still totally fine. You just kind of pick up where it's at. You can go back. I'm not sure how far you can go back, but you can go back and do days that have already passed and kind of catch up. But you can also just hop in. It's not like a program that has percentages that build on each other or anything like that. It's pretty much anyone can hop in anytime and try it out. So if you're interested, or if you've been interested, you've been contemplating it, now's the time to check it out, as those prices will go up pretty soon. So that is kind of it for the life updates. Hopefully that didn't sound like too much of a sob story, and hopefully it gives you guys a little bit of an idea of kind of the changes that I'm going through these days, if anyone cares. So let's end that and hop into today's questions. First question, kind of a question, but I will kind of make it into a question. Considerations on block or concurrent periodization for selection prep 1+ year out. So I think what he's asking is what would be a better method to do your training concurrently, which I'll get into the definition here in a second, versus block periodization, split your training up into blocks. So just a quick, very, very rudimentary baseline overview of these two things. Block periodization is when you kind of focus on one, maybe two, maybe a primary goal and maybe a secondary goal to kind of support that primary goal throughout a block or training phase, whatever it is. You can call it a mesocycle. 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it really depends. There's no like perfect duration of time to do this, but you basically focus on one attribute, and the other stuff that you do besides that attribute kind of support that. So it may be like you're trying to gain muscle, so you do a hypertrophy block, or you're trying to gain strength, you do a strength block, or you're trying to get better at running, you do a running block, or a base building block, or if you've already done your base building block, you do a speed block or a race prep block, whatever it is. Or maybe something like a power block where you're just focusing on building your power, and then you do a bunch of other stuff secondarily, but the main goal is the main goal. Whereas concurrent is more like hybrid training or tactical training, where you just train for multiple different things at the same time. The deltas of improvement for each of those attributes are going to be smaller when you do it concurrently. Whereas if you just focused on, say, for example, getting your 12-mile ruck time faster for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks in a row, of course, you're going to make a ton of progress on that, but also you're not going to make much progress in other stuff, assuming you're mainly focused on that rucking. Whereas concurrent training, even if you do want to get better at your 12-mile ruck, but you also want to get better at other things or maintain other things, you still will, if you focus a little bit more on that 12-mile ruck, but concurrently focus on a bunch of other things, gaining ability or improving at other things, yeah, you'll still get better and you'll still have a faster 12-mile ruck time after 12 weeks or however long you do it, but it won't be as drastic of an improvement. Hopefully that makes sense between the two. And my answer is, if you've been listening a while, you can probably guess it is concurrent. I have always been a fan of concurrent training. It just doesn't really apply. Block periodization, I should say, doesn't really apply in general. In most cases, I'll get into some potential exceptions here in a second, but usually it doesn't really apply to tactical athleticism because you have to be skilled and proficient at all times at multiple different things. For selection, it's a little bit more specific. The scope of things you have to be good at is a little bit more narrow, and that's a consideration. But the only time I would ever really consider block periodization, or kind of like a spin-off of it, it would not be complete block periodization where we just focus on like one thing, but we have like a very, very main focus that we put most of our attention on, and kind of like make sure that we're not getting terrible at the other things. The only time I would really consider that would be if someone has an incredibly strong attribute in regards to selection, because this question was kind of in the context of selection prep, and also an incredibly weak attribute. For example, maybe someone just graduated college and they were a Division 1 high level runner. Obviously, they're running, even if they didn't run for a year, they'd still probably be one of the top runners in the class, if not the top runner in the class. Maybe not quite with a full year of not running, but you kind of get the picture. But they are really weak and they don't lift weights and they have no strength. And maybe they do a little bit of strength workouts for their college running team, but it's not really actual strength. They don't have like enough, anywhere near enough strength to go and even make it through one ruck march, for example. In that case, a year plus out would be a great time to really put the pedal to the metal and really, really focus on strength. So you'd almost just do a strength focus block. You might run a little bit for this type of person, maybe once or twice a week for 30 to 45 minutes, nice easy run. But for the most part, it would be focused on getting strong in the main movement patterns: push, pull, overhead, horizontal, squat, hinge, etc., and eating and putting on some muscle too, because that also is going to kind of coincide and help with strength. Or vice versa, if someone is a former power lifter and they have not a single endurance bone in their body, but they want to go SF in a year or more, then for a while we might not stop lifting weights, because lifting while you're trying to develop your running ability is definitely important. It'll keep you healthy and it'll keep you durable. But we would significantly drop the focus on that, and we'd focus almost solely on developing a run base and getting into where you can run faster and so on and so forth. But again, that would just be temporary and that'd be really far out. When you're getting closer to selection, it should be like pure concurrent training. So my programs like Jack Gazelle 2.0, or T850 that I was kind of just talking about, 2 and 5 mile, would all be inside a year, but outside 3 to 4 months. Great programs for selection prep. And then once, of course, you get into those last few months, you can hit SFAS or ruck run lift. But outside a year, it's not quite as important, especially if you're pretty well balanced. You can do certain spin-offs of block periodization if you really want to, but at the same time, you got to think about your day-to-day stuff. If you're already in the military and all you do is squat, bench, and deadlift and try to get really, really strong at those, and you kind of put everything else to the side, then you're not going to really fare that well when it comes time to display some sort of endurance, whether it's infilling with your team or going house to house or individual movement techniques, whatever it may be. You're going to be strong, but you're also going to lack that. So you got to consider that as well. That's another potential downside of block periodization when you're in the military. Even as an X-ray, I would still probably consider not doing that, unless, of course, you're a college football player and you're going into your senior year and you want to go to selection after that. Yeah, you got to focus on whatever more immediate targets are for success in your college football career. So that's kind of an exception, but for the most part, concurrent training all the way is the best way to do it. Not just pre-selection, but throughout your entire career would be the best way that I would split it. And that's kind of the way that I approach all my programs. So really cool question. Wasn't really a question, but I definitely can imply what you were meaning. So yeah, hopefully that answered it. Next question. My PFT numbers are far worse when I test in the morning. Any experience fixing this? So regardless of who you are, it's just a biological fact that you are not going to be as primed to perform physically early in the morning as you are later in the day. It's just, that's not something we can really fight. That being said, the human body is very adaptive. So my first recommendation would be to start doing a lot more training in the morning around the same time, maybe not quite as early, because I am guessing if it's a regular Army, your PFT starts really, really early. But sometime early in the morning when it's still dark out, perhaps get your training sessions in. It doesn't have to be like mimicking the PFT. It should not be. You shouldn't really mimic your PFT in training. That's just kind of a byproduct of good, sound, consistent training. But getting your body used to getting up and training at that time would be a great way to kind of adapt to that and get used to it. Are you going to adapt so much that you're going to start performing better in the morning than you would later in the day, 6, 8, 10 hours after you wake up and get some meals, get some movement, get some hydration in? No, you won't be. But compared to where you're at right now, you absolutely will be. And compared to other people who are not really taking it upon themselves to get up and train in the morning, you'll make better progress than they will, relatively speaking. So another thing is you want to make sure that you're well fueled and well hydrated. This kind of starts the night before, and well rested, of course, which definitely starts the night before. Actually, being well rested for a PT test in the morning starts the morning before. Getting up at the same time that you get up at every day, after having gone to bed at the same time you go to bed every day. You might have to wake up earlier than you normally do for the PFT, but you still go to bed at the same time because your body's used to it. Most people are not doing this, but that would be ideal, is getting consistent sleep and wake schedules. I've talked about this a million times. And then the next morning, getting out in the sunlight, going through your day, doing the right things before bed, not looking at screens, winding down, getting the environment in your house or your barracks room or wherever you're at right, dark, cool, quiet, and getting to sleep. Also, ensuring that you have plenty of good, solid quality carbohydrates in your dinner the night before, even your lunch the night before. Actually, the lunch is probably even more important. Not that you have to really carb load for an AFT, you definitely don't, but having a good amount of carbs the day prior, especially about 16, 18 hours prior to the event, would be a smart idea because it kind of gives your body like the full amount of time to digest them. But also you want to consider fueling well that morning. And usually if it's an early test, you probably don't want to eat whole foods unless you're waking up a couple hours prior to when the test starts. That's fine, but you do still want some circulating glucose at minimum in your bloodstream. So something like a cluster dextrin, cyclic dextrin, Vitargo, even some fruit juice and or some Gatorade or something like that, where you get 30, 40, 50 grams of carbs in. You kind of sip on it over time as it goes into the test. Of course, you can add there's probably going to be some water, and you can add some salt or some sort of electrolyte packet if it's not already in the product. Tailwind's another really good one. Tailwind or Scratch. They have electrolytes built in plus the carbohydrates, and it tastes really good, and it's super easy to digesting, which you absolutely should shoot for easy digesting, which all the things I just listed are for most people. But that will kind of make it so that your body's going to tap into glycogen a little later. Not that you're going to need a ton of glycogen, but you will need some, especially if it's the AFT. There's a glycolytic component of the sprint drag carry, and then the 2 mile run, you want to be topped off. You want your glycogen stores topped off, and also you want to delay that by having some circulating glucose that you can immediately tap into. For those not aware, glycogen is basically stored sugar, stored carbohydrates that you get from like your consistent carbohydrate intake over on a macro level, like not macronutrient, but over time. Whereas glucose is from recent carbohydrates, circulating sugars that you can tap into very rapidly from recent carbohydrate intake. And so I would really make sure that you're doing that, hydrating well. Maybe if you can, showing up a little bit early and getting like a general warm up in, maybe doing a little bit of a jog, maybe doing some strides, maybe doing some dynamic warm ups, upper body, lower body, just to make sure that you're going into the test at least with maybe a little sweat, maybe a little bit of a increased heart rate, maybe your muscles, especially your joints, are kind of warmed up, because it just takes a while for your joints to warm up throughout the day in general. So if you're just going straight into the PFT without doing any sort of warm up, yeah, you're going to have an absolutely terrible time compared to what you could do if you did a little bit of a warm up, and even more so compared to if you did all the other things I listed before that. So hopefully that helps. No matter what, you're going to be a little bit less primed to perform early in the morning, but it's not that bad as long as you get used to it and you take the right approach, fuel, rest, and warm up wise. So best of luck. Next question, are heavy weight 3 to 5 rep or lighter weight 12 to 15 rep ass-to-grass squats better for selection prep? In general, if we're talking about back squats, and if we're talking about trying to make these like working sets and really take them close to failure, you're not doing something like pre-fatigue before you go for a run just to get used to running on fatigue legs, which could be a method that some people use in certain situations. But if we're talking about just the strength component, getting ready for the strength component at SFAS, which is not as robust as the endurance component, nowhere near, but it's still definitely a factor. And also it can assist your endurance, which is kind of, as long as you're strong enough, you're generally strong enough, which most guys are in my experience, to go to selection and be fine. The main focus of your strength work in general, besides of course your specific calisthenics like your push-ups and pull-ups that you're going to get tested on, should be to support your endurance and enhance your endurance gains. And on that note, the lower rep, heavier loads would be a much better option in this case. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do anything for 12 to 15 reps, like a set of walking lunges, goblet squats. If you're going a little bit lighter and you don't want to load the spine a ton, absolutely can do that. But for the most part, a lot of people kind of get this mixed up. They think that doing higher reps for lower body is going to help with their leg muscle endurance for running and rucking. It's not really like that. Leg muscle endurance is very, very specific. So doing really high reps of squats or lunges or whatever is going to make you really good at doing high reps of squats or lunges or whatever, but it's not really going to translate over to running. And in fact, higher reps, especially when taken close to failure, which to make a set effective at producing enough stimulus to get where you want to go, you got to take them somewhat close to failure, if not to failure for certain things. But for the most part, in selection prep, especially if you're doing lower reps and heavier, you want to stay at least a rep, probably 2 reps, maybe sometimes 3 reps shy of failure. And it's still effective. In order to do that, when you're doing really high rep sets, it's a lot more fatiguing, and it will interfere or steal from potential recovery reserves that you could use for running and rucking, which are a lot more critical and a lot more specific to selection. So if I had to choose between these two, for the most part, especially for like back squats, front squats, belt squats, whatever you're doing for a squat movement, definitely select the lower rep one. But again, don't think that you can't ever do high rep stuff. There's absolutely a time and a place for them. But for the most part, you want to keep reps low. You want to keep fatigue low. Generally, you want to keep lower body volume low in the gym so that you can really crank the volume on the runs and the rucks. Your body can only handle so much, and it doesn't really take much to maintain or even build small amounts of strength. And for the most part, like I said earlier, you probably just need to maintain. Even there are plenty of guys that could lose a little bit of strength and trade that off for improved rucking or running ability, and they'd be still totally fine. They'd be better off, not even just totally fine, they'd be better off as far as their selection fate. So that is the way I'd approach it. Next question, what made you want to leave the military? The fact that there's a few different factors, but mainly the fact that I started this business and I really liked this. I was starting to like this and feel more fulfilled by this business than I was going to work in the military, going to work as a Green Beret. That wasn't like an instant thing, but it just kind of happened over time as I started seeing this business kind of take off and started to kind of prove to myself that I actually had something to say and people cared about what I had to say. So that kind of was just like a development over a few years. I think I started making like content. I didn't really start making this an official business, but I just kind of made it like an Instagram page and started doing podcasts and articles and things like that in like late 21, I believe. And I didn't get out till 2023, so it was a couple years. But that's definitely one of them. Another one is the fact that I was at 12 years. So my enlistment was up and I had been in for just over 12 years. And in the Army, after you hit your 10-year mark, it used to be 12, your next enlistment has to be indef. If you decide to stay in active duty, you have to go indefinitely, which another word for that is pretty much you're going to do 20 years and then retire, unless, of course, you medically retire or something else happens. You can definitely get out of it, but it's just kind of a pain in the ass. So I pretty much had 2 options. 1, stay in for another 8 years, or 2, get out. Or I could have gone National Guard, and I've answered several times in the past why I didn't do that. I just didn't really want to be honest. I wanted to do this full time. But those were pretty much my 2 options. And because of what I said in the first part of the answer, I like this more, and I was more fulfilled by this, and I really wanted to see what happened if I put all of my effort into this business. That's one of the main reasons I got out. And lastly, if we're being honest, like the last few years I was in after we left Afghanistan in 2020 or early 2021, there wasn't really much going on. And although it's definitely still awesome to be in the military during peacetime or pseudo peacetime, I would consider this right now like pseudo peacetime. We're not really heavily involved in conflict, especially like conventional military, but it wouldn't be like complete peacetime. I don't think that'll ever happen, but it's not as enjoyable, and I just felt a little bit less fulfilled, and I felt like I was making less of a difference. I felt like we as a team in general were making less of a difference, which is not necessarily factual. Like that's not necessarily the case, just the way I perceived it. But that was kind of enough, that multiple different variables were enough to make me decide to get out. And although I do certainly miss the good times and the good dudes and the great aspects of SOF, I absolutely do miss that. I still am not regretting my decision whatsoever. Like I really enjoy what I do now and wouldn't trade it for the world. So yeah, that's kind of the main reasons I got out, and now here we are. Next question, is CQB and Delta /OTC as hard as people make it out to be? Well, considering the fact that that is the main reason I got dropped from OTC, Of course, I'm very, very biased, but yes, I would say it's hard. It's honestly, for me, it was harder than most people made it out to be. And it's not because it's like super advanced stuff. It's just the fact that CQB in general is pretty difficult to do. You have to be a very fast decision maker. You have to move really fluidly. You have to move really well. You have to be very, very accurate with your shots. You have to be safe. You have to have a lot of situational awareness. You have to have awareness and familiarity with the guys around you and what they're going to do. And there's a lot of different unique aspects inside a house or inside a building that aren't just walking into a square room and clearing it. Like there's a lot that goes into it. Tons and tons of different moving pieces. And there, it's not like they are doing a bunch of like highly advanced high speed stuff, although they're very, very advanced, but they're very advanced and very skilled at the basics, like very, very skilled. The operators are. They still demand you to live up to a certain standard and meet that standard and continue to show that you're able to meet that standard over time as it gets harder and harder and more stressful and so on and so forth. So that is kind of the hardest aspect to it. And the fact that you have people watching you like a hawk every single move you make, you're not going to get away with anything. Any sort of little mistake, you're going to get called out for it, which is the way it should be. And I will say I had several guys in my class. I'm not going to really get into too many details about it because it's kind of secret, and I absolutely respect the unit way too much to talk about details. But I did have guys in my class that came from the CRIF, which is basically the CQB experts in SF, as well as Ranger Regiment, who help a lot with Delta's operations, and they do a lot of CQB themselves. Not necessarily on target, but they do a lot of CQB training, and they probably have done some CQB in the past during wartime. But those guys also find it hard, and those guys also mess it up a lot. Most of the guys in my class that had those backgrounds still passed, but several of them got drop warnings. Most guys do get drop warnings in general. But yeah, I would say it is, in my opinion, and as well as other people's opinions that I respect and that have been there and done it and successfully done it or unsuccessfully done it, I would say it's much harder than a lot of people make it out to be. It's just really hard to explain. You kind of have to see it to know what I'm talking about. Again, I could get into like extreme serious detail, but I am not going to do that on a public show. But yeah, it was a very, very hard kick in the nuts when I got dropped, and I would consider it one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I believe that I had the ability to make it through, and I had the ability to meet those standards that they wanted me to. I just, for whatever reason, did not actually display it when I needed to, how I needed to, and in a proficient enough way that they wanted to see out of me. So, great question, and hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of a taste of it. Next question, what do you tell yourself before and during a challenging physical event? Honestly, I am not a huge internal self motivator talker. I definitely have a lot of internal dialogue, but usually it's like I'm thinking about random stuff, or I'm stressing about something, or I'm thinking about the future, or whatever it may be. It's not usually acute during training or right before I train in general. I would say the thing that I kind of leaned on most is just the confidence that I had put in the hours and the days and the blood and the sweat and the tears in training to be able to go and just crush whatever I was about to go do physically in Army standards. And pretty much everything I ever did physically in the military, I was a top performer at, just because I worked my ass off. Yes, I have like pretty solid genetics to be a good endurance athlete. And in the Army, the endurance standards aren't similar to like what endurance standards would be for a high level runner or something like that. But I would consider myself a top performer by Army soft standards. And it's mainly because I put a lot of effort into not just training, but also things outside training, especially later in my career. Early in my career, I definitely drank too much, I partied too much, but I was, other than that, very, very dialed in. Of course, that's like a big thing to make you not dialed in. Like, I'm not downplaying that, but I was, no matter what, I would get up and train. No matter what, even if I was hungover, I would go and do my training session. Not saying that's like a super smart thing or anything like that, but I was just dialed and very, very, very consistent. And I would train more consistently and harder and more effectively, in my opinion. And also, obviously the results kind of spoke for it than anyone else. So before an event like that, I just knew that I was capable of going and crushing it. That being said, there were certain things that I wasn't super familiar with. Like when I first started doing medical skills, hands-on medical skills, I had never done anything like that in the past. So I had like serious performance anxiety for that. I definitely had some anxiety when I was going through CQB in OTC and other things too, like before my first free fall jump, before my first static line jump, before my first static line jump after jumping free fall, which is way less scary for like 5-6 years and going back to static line. I was definitely very, very anxious and miserable before that. In that case, my symptoms when I'm really, really anxious are I get a little shaky, my heart beats really, really rapidly, and I can like feel it up in my throat. And sometimes I'll get a little bit of a sweat. And my usual approach when that occurs is to really focus on my breathing, just calm, diaphragmatic breathing, really focus on it. Tell yourself everything's going to be okay. Tell yourself that everyone else does this, and even though I haven't done it before, I can get really good at it, but I have to actually do it in order to get better at it. So that's about as much self-talk as I can really think about getting into. Most of the time, it was just confidence that your training has taken you to where you can go and crush whatever you're given as far as physical tests go. So, and I will say there's a lot of different methods that work for a lot of different people. So just because that's my method does not mean that other people don't have better or more effective for them methods. Some people do like compartmentalization where they just kind of take their mind off it. They'll think about something else, or some people will just pretend that they enjoy being miserable and enjoy the pain. That was kind of sometimes what I did towards the end of training sessions or the end of like long grueling stuff. But for the most part, it was just like, hey, I've been working for this and I am going to go crush it because I know I'm capable because I put the work in. So hopefully that helps. Next question, 6 months out from leaving with an 18X, should I run JG2 then SFAS prep? You absolutely could. That would be a great way to do it. Lots of people do. That would be a good option, especially if you're balanced already and you don't have a long way to go. Like say you're one of the examples I talked about earlier where you're just really strong, but you suck at endurance, then probably something like 2 and 5 mile or even ruck run lift. This is kind of a little bit of a unique situation, but if you really lack endurance, ruck run lift followed by SFAS prep or SFAS prep followed by ruck run lift would be a solid option too. I would follow, if you're doing ruck run lift into SFAS prep, I would do the runner version for the most part. You can do a little bit more rucking, maybe every 3 weeks, the long day, you can do a ruck. But for the most part, I would just do the runner version. Make sure you have a ruck on a couple times a month. And then when you get into SFAS prep, it's going to be lower volume, but also it's going to be like very, very specific and you're going to have an incredible base built up. And that's when you really get into a little bit more ruck dominance, a little bit less running. All the running is basically speed based. So you're going to, at very worst, maintain what you built during ruck run lift, but you most likely will kind of get a little bit faster because it's very, very specific, high quality sessions. But you're also going to get into a lot of ruck running and you're going to get ready for ruck gates as well as just like land nav style rucks where you're just going long, long, long and heavy and slow, relatively slow, but you're doing it day after day after day and thinking and stressed out the whole time and so on and so forth. So Jack Gazelle 2 followed by SFAS would be a great option if you're nice and balanced. Something like maybe if you just need a little bit of work on your running and you really want to bring that up before you get into SFAS prep where you're going to be a little bit more spread out as far as what you're focusing on, because SFAS is not just running. You could do 2 and 5 mile into SFAS prep or 2 and 5 mile into ruck run lift. Jack Gazelle 1 is fine, or T850 up until it's time to switch to selection prep would also be another option. So lots of different ways to skin it, just kind of depends on where you're at. Next question, why are my run times slower when I add calisthenics versus just running? For example, PFT run versus a training run. Most likely because you're a little bit more fatigued from doing the PFT stuff, but honestly, it shouldn't make that huge of a difference if you have decent work capacity, like if you just train like a tactical athlete should on any number of different programs, or, honestly, really just doing some form of conditioning that kind of gets your aerobic system developed as well as your glycolytic energy system. Over time, you're going to get to a point where it's not really going to affect you all that much. Yeah, you'll be a little bit slower, but like we're talking less than 5 seconds, hopefully on a short run, like a 2 mile, doing calisthenics first versus not doing calisthenics first. But also it could be other things. I have some clients, or I've had some clients in the past that perform better certain training sessions. Like 3 or 4 of my clients over the last 6 months have PR'd their 5K on a tempo run training. and they run it faster than, because I usually give my dudes 5K time trials because it's right kind of in the middle of a 2 mile and a 5 mile. So instead of, not always, but instead of giving them 2 time trials that week, I'll just give them a 5K. But I've had plenty of guys run their 5K time trial, and then like 2 weeks later, they'll do a tempo run, not even going all out. Just tempo runs are usually 7 to 8 RPE, and I give them specific pacing and all that kind of stuff, and they'll PR their 5K as part of their tempo run, and then continue their tempo run, warm up, cool down, all that stuff. Generally speaking, that's usually either you just have a bad day, or in most cases, it's just kind of test anxiety, where you know you're getting tested on it. You know, no matter what, you have to perform really, really well over the next, whatever it is, 12 minutes, 13 minutes, 14 minutes on this run. And it's your only shot at it. It's not like you can just do it whenever you want that week, or it's not like it's just a training session and the consequences for not doing as well aren't as grave. You might be a little frustrated and down, but you're not going to like get any sort of, it's not going to be humiliating, or you're not going to get some sort of paperwork or anything. Hopefully you're not getting paperwork on you, but I'm guessing you're trying to max it and you're not quite maxing it. Hopefully that should be the goal. So it could be some sort of mix of anxiety / having a bad day / the fact that you're a little more fatigued from PFT. But honestly, it shouldn't be that drastic of a difference. If you are experiencing test anxiety, although this is not optimal as far as training progress is concerned, usually what I do with my guys is I give them the option to just hit a time trial on any day they want after they warm up. So maybe the workout that day is repeats, like 400-meter repeats, but they do their warm up and their warm up feels great. And they're like, wow, I feel like I can crush today. That's when they go and do the time trial. So, and I'll have them do them more frequently. I'll be like, over the next 6 weeks, you should do 3 5K time trials, and they can be any day you want after your warm up, days you feel good. Don't pre-plan it the day before. Don't even think about it before you go start your training session. If your warm ups feel really good, that's when you can do it. And just do your best. Don't even think of it as a test. If you don't run well, you don't even have to like tell me what your time was. You can just say, I did the time trial, didn't go that well. On to the next. And that kind of takes the mental and anxiety out of that. And by doing it more often, although you're kind of missing out on a training stimulus because time trials are more fatiguing, not quite as stimulative as like a training session, you are getting used to doing those time trials. And then once we kind of get past that hump where you do a few time trials, you do really well, and they're kind of sua sponte in the moment you decide to do it, then I'll start assigning them time trials well in advance, and they'll have to think about it and they'll have to approach it. Basically, you're just practicing. You're getting more used to it over time. So that could be another option and another good solid method if you feel like you have some pre-test anxiety that really messes you up. But any of those methods or any of those mindsets could work. In general, though, it's probably you just have to get more fit. Next question, I'm up 7 pounds of mostly fat after Sapper. Classic, definitely not uncommon at all. I definitely was fat after Ranger School for a period of time. But I have dive school in 3 months. Should I lose weight or focus on performance? Yes, you should do both. What I would do is have performance as your 1A, your main goal, because no one's really going to care if you're 8% versus 10% versus 12% body fat when you're at dive school. Of course, yeah, being lean for like the class photo, which you probably will be, because I think the class photo is at the end. It's only the guys that pass. You'll be lean anyway after dive school because you're just going to be burning thousands and thousands and thousands of calories. No matter how ham you go on weekends, which most guys do, and no matter how much you eat in the DFAC, you're probably relative to where you're usually at, you're probably going to be leaner after dive school. But anyway, when you show up, no one's really going to care about your looks. However, being 7 pounds fatter than you were before is also going to be a performance detractor, as well as the fact that you just went to Sapper school, which is definitely not like anything like Ranger school as far as stress and how much weight you lose and how much it beats you up and the potential recovery time after. You still are in a suppressed state. You're not as fit as you were, and you're fatter than you were. So you're going to have to start mainly focusing on performance, but you can also perform well in a calorie deficit, especially for endurance stuff, especially because dive school doesn't really involve much strength. You don't have to do a ton of strength training. You should do a little bit just to maintain and support your swimming and support your running, but you don't have to do a ton. So losing that fat in combination with your run training and your swim training and, you know, getting ready for dive school would be advantageous because you'd just be more efficient. You're going to be smaller and it's going to be easier for you to move, and probably also you're at a lower injury risk. If you're 7 pounds heavier, that's not that much and it's nothing crazy. But 7 pounds of fat heavier, you probably didn't do a lot of running at sapper school, I'm guessing. So getting back into running and being heavier, that's something that a lot of people don't consider, to include like professional runners coming off their off season. They'll come back and they'll have gained some weight. They haven't been doing much running. They get back into running. They hurt themselves because they're just heavier and their body's not used to that yet. So I would make performance 1A, fat loss 1B, and you can absolutely do them at the same time, just because being in a calorie deficit is a slight recovery deficit. As long as you're reasonable with it, you're eating enough protein, you're eating enough carbs, and you're not in too big of a deficit, maybe like 300 calories a day, 400 calories a day on average, then you can still perform really well, even if you're not quite recovering as well as you would if you were eating at maintenance. So best of luck at dive school. Go crush. Next question, got sick and had to take a month off running. How much of my base did I lose? Well, before I get into an answer, you should probably ask yourself, is the way I answer this question going to change what you do in the future? Are you still going to get back into running and start rebuilding your base? Probably, you probably will, regardless of whether I say it's going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it's going to take 6 months, it's going to take half a year. There's one way to find out, and that's to just get back into it and start rebuilding your base. So that's kind of what I would recommend doing regardless. It's like, who knows how long it's going to take, but regardless of how long it's going to take, ideally you still do it. So that being said, a month off, if you're sick, it really it depends on so many variables. It depends on what you were sick with. It depends on how much of a base you had before. It depends on your running history. It depends on whether you trained at all or not for a month. I'm guessing if you were sick for a month, it was pretty serious. So you probably lost some weight. You probably lost some strength. Your body is definitely just like kind of in a stressed out, suppressed state. I'm sure if you were sick for a month, you're not like fully back to being fucking ready to go. So lots and lots of different factors, which is why it's really hard to answer this, but it should take you. I mean, if you are completely healthy and you go about it in the right way, you start building yourself back up pretty well, you should be able to get to where you were at before you got sick. Again, depending on what you were sick with, how severe it was, within a month, but it might be faster than that. It might be a little longer than that. It's just really hard to answer. But again, your best bet is to go and do it and see for yourself how long it takes. And that'll be your best answer, regardless of what I say. So good luck rebuilding that base. All right, next question. Selection involves a lot of walking. That's a fact. It sure does. Would adding daily walks on top of a prep plan be a good idea? Absolutely. I would say, honestly, there are very few situations where I would ever tell anyone, at least in America, at least in like the developed parts of America, to not walk or to walk less. Or when faced with a decision to go for a walk or not walk or walk more or not, usually I would say walk more almost every single time. So here, is it going to make a huge difference? No, but is it going to make a difference if you are getting 15, 18, 20K steps a day or something like that? Absolutely. And the great thing about walking is it's very low stress. So although you'll probably have to compensate by eating a little bit more calories, it's probably, as long as you're not going crazy or you're not considering every single walk you go on, you're not wearing a ruck or bursting into a run or trying to go at a breakneck walking pace, just going out on walks throughout the day, it's not going to make it harder for you to recover in general from your training. There are certain situations, if you get crazy with step count, that it can absolutely do it. Or if you're not compensating by eating a little bit more calories from the calories you're burning from all the walking, then yeah, it can kind of interfere a little bit. But in most cases, I would say walk all you want, as much as your heart desires. Just make sure that you're still making progress in the main things that you want to make progress in. If you're hitting a progress plateau or something like that, it's probably not because you're walking, but it may be one of a later thing to troubleshoot. Like if, your diet's locked in and you are sleeping really well and your stress is low and you're feeling good in general, you're just not making progress and you're hitting 20, 25,000 steps a day or something like that, then maybe dialing that back to 15K may be a good troubleshooting step just to see if that helps. But that's kind of like a very hypothetical scenario. That's probably not going to happen. So in general, if you're an American, you should probably walk more. That's just a very general statement, but it applies to almost everybody. Next question, just started your hypertrophy plan, but still an infantryman, so I don't want to ditch running altogether. Any tips? Yeah, I mean, the hypertrophy program is not necessarily geared towards military, although I'm going to get into how you can kind of mitigate the fact that you kind of chose the wrong program here in a second. But in general, I would have chose Jack Gazelle 2.0 or Jack Gazelle, or even 2 and 5 mile. You wouldn't gain as much muscle on 2 and 5 mile, or my sleeper program, which is on Train Heroic, which is a 10-week program, a 10-week hypertrophy program that also involves conditioning. That is Bro Split Plus on Train Heroic, which is linked in the description if you want to check it out. But since you got I'm assuming the 19-week hypertrophy program, that's a PDF program on my website, there's no conditioning in that because it's mainly geared towards muscle gain. And if you want to maintain your running, because the lifting volume is high enough that doing like a serious run program on the side or doing speed work, tempo work, long runs, etc. during that program is probably going to be too much for most people. So what I would do is, if you want to stick to that program, no big deal. I would just keep your runs easy. 2 days a week, probably at the least 2 runs, 30 to 60 minutes or so. Or you could do 3 days a week, 30 to 60 minutes, depending on where you were at before. And you could also consider some cross training just to kind of keep the joint stress and the impact down a little bit, because that'll not make you a great runner, but it'll help you keep your aerobic development. And you can maybe every so often, you can do something like short repeats with really long rest periods, like not necessarily going and doing like 10 400-meter repeats with like short jogging rest periods like you would for like 2 mile prep or 5 mile prep or something like that. But maybe you go do 10 to 12 200-meter repeats, and you do them at your goal 2 mile pace, and you rest for 1 to 2 minutes in between, complete rest. That way you're getting used to, you're still maintaining the ability to run at around that pace, but you're also making that workout way less fatiguing. Additionally, I would do at least once a week, preferably twice. You do either strides or pickups. Strides after a run, pickups are basically strides during a run, anywhere from like 20 to 30 seconds or so, 4 to 6, maybe up to 8 rounds, depending on how much you're running. That will also keep you primed to run fast. And doing that, as long as your sleep is dialed in, which hopefully it is, although you're an infantryman, so it may not be, and it may not be your fault, but most likely you could do a little bit better on it. And your nutrition's dialed in, and you're not doing anything crazy on weekends, like just going on benders, then that should be manageable. But if it's not, you kind of got to come to a decision. What's more important to me? Get more jacked or maintain my ability to run? And if it's the latter, then maybe consider a different program that has more running in it. If it's the former, just kind of stick with what you got and dial back the running a little bit so you can recover and make that progress and kind of go from there. So that is the way I'd approach it. Next question, we'll do 2 more. I have an injury that prevents me from running. Are there any modalities to get better at running? While you're not able to run at all, you can get better at running if you are really bad at running right now and you got injured and you do a couple months of cross training. Elliptical would probably be the best option as far as transitioning into running. It's kind of like running. You're on your feet. You're not doing any impact, so it's not the same, but it kind of transfers decently over to running. But even biking and rowing, or really any other cardio that's non-impact, will make you fitter aerobically. And again, assuming you're not very aerobically fit or running fit when you get hurt, because you're so much better aerobically after that period of time doing non-running modalities, but plenty of it and well-structured, you're doing long stuff, you're doing tempo stuff, you're doing shorter interval style stuff, then you're probably going to be better at running at the end. But for the most part, if you're already decent at running and you have to take a bunch of time off running, even though you're still going to do those things, or you still should do those things in the meantime to maintain/build your overall general aerobic fitness, because running is so specific and it has such a significant skill component, and because it has a big time durability component, like in order to do it consistently without getting hurt, you have to actually run to get better at running. Like, it's just kind of the way it is. Again, in most cases, of course, there are hypothetical scenarios that don't apply to that. But that being said, if you are a pretty solid runner right now and you got hurt and you stick with your cross training and you're very consistent with it, you progress volume, you do multiple different intensities, durations, etc., when you get back to running, you're going to be way, 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 way better at it than you would be if you didn't do that throughout the time you were injured. And believe it or not, I mean, that sounds obvious, but believe it or not, a lot of people, when they get injured, they kind of just go off the deep end and they sulk and they feel bad for themselves and they do nothing instead of trying to do their best and maintain whatever they possibly can during that period of time that they're injured. That would be by far the best decision, is to do what you can do. Think of all the things that you can still continue to get better at and the positive things that are going on in your life while you're hurt. Even though you can't run, you want to be able to run, you're not getting significantly better at running for a little while. In the long run, a lot of people don't take that time off, or they don't take enough time off, so they get back into running, they get hurt. Even if they are getting better at running, when they come back, they get hurt because they kind of jumped the gun, or they started ramping up too fast, or they just say, I'm hurt, and therefore, no matter what, I can't do any training because I hurt my knee. And of course, there's no exercises in existence that I can do with a hurt knee. So I'm not saying that's you, but I have seen this in the past and I've experienced it. And in almost every single case in existence, in almost every single case of injury, minus something like spinal, or minus like an organ issue, or something really serious like a doc says, do not train no matter what, usually you can find something to do to train. And in this case, just because you can't run does not mean you can't still develop your aerobic base and honestly build a very robust aerobic base, depending on how long it is, by doing other modalities. And that's kind of what I would consider doing. All right, last question, and we'll do two more because this one's going to be really quick. Is log PT back at SFAS? I don't know. I have not heard from any clients that it is. Then again, I have 2 clients that should be finishing today. Hopefully they made it, but today's the last day. Today's the day they get their phones back. So I'm going to be looking at my text messages for quite a bit of today just to see if they hit me up, but haven't heard from either of them yet. So they at least are done. Whether they passed or not, haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, I will know because I'll ask them if there's log PT back. But as far as I know, there isn't. But even if there is, it's not really anything crazy. You just kind of got to suck it up. It's more of a smoke session than it is like, I got to perform physically or else I'm fucked. Honestly, most people who got dropped during log and rifle PT either quit because it was really brutal, or they got hurt because either their team wasn't putting out, or they just didn't show up prepared, or they had a little lapse in judgment or a lapse in focus and they hurt themselves, because that stuff can be a little bit dangerous. And I think one of the main reasons they got rid of it, at least for a while, it may be back, but at least got rid of it for a while, is because guys were getting hurt a little bit more often than they wanted to, and it wasn't really like testing their ability to actually be a potential future Green Beret. It was just kind of beating them up. But I will say, like, a lot of guys in my class quit that day, either during the log PT or the rifle PT, or believe it or not, some guys, even though it was very obvious to all of us that was the only day that we were going to be smoked like that, guys would quit after it. A few guys in my class quit when we were done with log and rifle PT. Like, that was so brutal that I'm done. But selection does get harder after that, but you don't get smoked for 6-8 hours like you did for log PT. That was just kind of like a one-day thing. So is it back? I don't know. If it's not, no big deal. If it is, also no big deal. Just don't quit and go and do your best. Next question, how are some people able to run fast at high body fat percentages? Is it genetics? Cool question. And this is definitely something that I've observed as well. And it's kind of like a little, maybe like an inside joke in the military. Guys who are overweight are really good at sit-ups for some reason, back when we used to do sit-ups for the APFT. And guys who are overweight are sometimes surprisingly really good at running. And also guys who smoke like a chimney are also sometimes really surprisingly good at running. And it's just kind of like something that is a general observation about military guys. I would say, yes, genetics is of course a factor, but also your body fat, how fat you are, does not really have to do with what you do for training. You could run 100 miles a week and still be fat, and you'd probably be pretty damn good at running. And you'd be healthier than if you were that same fatness, maybe not 100 miles a week, but if you ran on a regular basis, but you just ate in a calorie surplus and thus got fat and stayed fat, you'd still be good at running, and you'd still be healthier than you would if you were the same body structure, same body composition, but you didn't run, but you'd still be fat, and people would kind of wonder why you're running so fast when you're fat. And yes, genetics, of course, genetics affect literally everything that anyone is good or bad at. There's a genetic component. That's a fact. But my guess is, for the most part, most guys who are overweight and fast at running, or at least military fast at running, just run a lot and they work at it. They just kind of are a little bit of a soup sandwich in the kitchen. So they eat in a calorie surplus and therefore they gain body fat. So genetics as well as training is probably the same. they'd probably be much better at running if they ate less and weren't as fat. But hey, you can still get pretty good at running or other things athletically and be fat at the same time. It's not ideal, but it is far better than being fat and not in shape. Far, 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 far better than being fat and not in shape or not physically fit. And it's also better than being fat and slow. And it's also better than being skinny and slow. There are plenty of guys that they look like they can run 9:32 miles, but they run a 18:32 mile. And they're also super weak in the gym. I'm not saying that's like a regular thing in SOF or anything like that, but there are guys like that in the military. And that's always been perplexing to me too. Just guys don't train, but they also don't eat. They're typically this kind of avatar, nothing against you if you like this kind of stuff, but typically this type of avatar is like into video games and they just play tons and tons of video games. They drink a bunch of Mountain Dew. They don't eat almost any protein. They eat maybe a pizza every 2 days or something like that. So they're in this like constant calorie deficit, super skinny, but they don't train. And it shows when it's time to get tested on their running ability, especially on their strength ability. So yeah, kind of just an interesting little observation. That is absolutely a fair question and a fair observation, but that is my best stab at explaining why. And with that, let's wrap it up. That is it for today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be back soon with another episode. Appreciate the support. If you've left a review, comment, like, whatever have you, it means a lot and it really helps us. So we really appreciate that. And yeah, gonna keep them coming. So stay tuned. All right, guys. Chat soon. Terminator out.